moment, if you would like to turn your screens off or not, as you prefer, and just make sure you have, some really basic resources around you, like something perhaps to drink. And also, just if you've come straight from another meeting or something else, if you'd like to stretch or move your body around in a particular way. I like to think of myself as my 3-year-old self, and without so much, kind of adult mindset on board, maybe just move around in ways that would feel like I was just on the playground for a minute. And maybe this evening, and I'm not going to do it out loud because it'll be quite obnoxious, but see if you can exhale like a horse sneezing, or kind of like, how is it sneezing they're actually doing? Maybe somebody can give me the anatomy of that, but use your lips and mute yourself, or not, we can make it amusing, but use, next time you exhale, see if you can exhale and make your lips get really activated. And so see what that feels like, and just exhale, kind of audibilize that. So it might, I'll see if I can try it like this, something like that. So kind of make it like there's some sound, and see if your face can get involved in doing a little relaxing. And then attend to your breathing in whatever way supports you. And I'm going to leave it to you to notice what attention of breathing you need for this evening. And this is all an invitation, and if it supports you, lovely. And if it doesn't suit you, opt out of any of these suggestions. And now just draw your attention again to your spine, and invite in the spaces between the vertebrae to be noticed. And the durability and the elegance and strength of your back, and the muscles and structure that support you to be able to be upright in whatever fashion, seated or standing, that you might be. And with that, now coming around to our front side and appreciating the soft and supple side of ourselves, and the interface of our strong back and our soft front. And just see if you can track and sense any sensations on that front side of yourself. And notice any positive or neutral sensations in that regard. And if you're not noticing anything in that way, not to make that a problem or an issue, just notice that. So appreciating our strong back and our supple and soft fronts. We now invite you to turn your attention back to this group this evening, and just take that last exhale, perhaps sending out support to anyone in the world that is maybe not having the time or attention to notice their own strong back and their own soft and supple fronts, and pass it on to somebody else in the world that might need that support or could benefit from that this evening. And with that, I invite you to turn your screens back to the group. So for those of you that joined while we were doing a little grounding practice, welcome. We're really happy you're here, and we're delighted to see everyone here. We want to name that next week is a holiday in the United States, and we will not have a session. So if you click on the Zoom link, it will it'll say you're not, like you're waiting or something. It might say you're waiting, but I'm not going to be there. So if you want to go and hang out in the waiting room with Zoom, you're more than welcome to on Memorial Day, but there will be no session. So tonight is our 8th week, and then we will have a week off, and then we will have our 9th and 10th sessions in June. And what I wanted to do this evening is I want to invite us to have a check-in that we're going to work with in the chat. So here's our check-in. I invite us to think of one thing this past week that someone did for you that you would name compassion. Something that you received that was a moment of compassion from your perception, whatever that means to you. And if no one acted in that fashion, or you did not receive such a thing, tell us something that would have been great, that could have been a gesture that really would have supported you this past week. So we'll just give you a moment to think of that, and then just write that in the chat for us, and just give us a little, obviously a little snippet of what that action might look like. So let's just give ourselves a moment here, and I'm going to make Sally Maria co-host again. And when you feel ready, just add something into the chat. That's something that hit you in that way. Okay, I'm trying to not use violent words when I just use violence. That you received in that way. That was not like a hit, but it was like a big old hug. So. Would someone be willing to read the chat like we do sometimes, kind of like a beautiful poem? That's how I hear it anyway.
I guess I can read him. Listened. Someone at work listened to me while I talked about something that I was feeling worried, upset, and conflicted about. My 9-year-old granddaughter sat by me for 2 hours while I wasn't feeling well. I woke up and she was there. Dinner was prepared, a hug was given, tea was served. So many small things came my way, many more. Someone I love listened to me when I was feeling very stressed and helped me calm me down. A Zoom meeting with one of my Buddhist teachers. Someone checked on me after a long day of working. My wife and my date last week, and my partner, who generally likes a quiet house, asked me who I would like to come for extended visits this summer.
Brian, thank you so much. So this evening, we're going to turn our attention, moving from empathy and our discussion last week around empathic concern, and naming empathic concern as those two pieces of affective and cognitive empathy, and also articulating the difference of that side road of empathic distress that I, kind of name a little bit of a dead end in terms of it doesn't leave the path open for us to move then deeper into compassion. So this evening, just think where we've traveled. It's week 8, and we're finally, discussing the name of this program specifically. We just really want to, first of all, honor all of you for being here with us and taking the time and the energy and the effort to attend these classes and to have the curiosity. I know many of you have deep esoteric practices. And so I really just want to honor the richness that it brings to this group by having all of you support this curriculum in this way. And this evening, we're turning our attention to compassion with the building blocks that we've brought on along with us. So just again, think back to where we've traveled. The calming body and mind, we look at as the return to it over and over and over as the essential place to start to be in our resilience zone, so that we then can have the ethical mindfulness to have that focused attention to what our values really are. That then allows us to decipher the beneficial and afflictive emotions and maybe kind of take that gap and realize we have some choice points in that spark to forest fire kind of proliferation. And then moving into self-compassion, being aware that we are both innately of value and have merit, and that self-compassion is also really believing and supporting ourselves to be in transformation and change. And then moving that out into the world and noticing our common humanity and our interdependence and really valuing our just like me-ness, while also being really appreciative and aware that we have all kinds of differences, and that diversity and complexity is, beautiful and fantastic. And then bringing that further and moving that forward into the practices of forgiveness and gratitude, which is amplified if we are working with the common humanity and interdependence pieces. And then allowing us with that, I think of it like the reservoir of myself is like, perhaps I've been able to kind of clear some space to have more capacity and room for empathic concern. And then now moving us toward these practices where compassion is on board. And with that, I want to ask all of you, when this word compassion comes up, what does it mean to you? When we say compassion, what comes up? And as we do, you are most welcome to unmute and just audibilize, or you can put it in the chat. But I'd love to hear the collective wisdom and what shows up if we, build this collage or tapestry of what does compassion mean to us. Big open heart, Marianne. Thanks. What else? Love and caring. Caring for yourself and others. An act of kindness toward others. Give something to someone else that they might need.
An active and intentional response with others and yourself in mind.
Thank you, Lauren. Acts motivated by a wish to relieve the unhappiness, the suffering, the bummed outness of others. Kavita is now co-facilitating the training with us. So let's put the definition from the CIT point of view, again, all of what you've said, and we're using this quite specific definition and awareness of connection. And Jim, you're lifting up the awareness of connection is, in a lot of the newest neuroscience that's not directly in CIT, but all the polyvagal theory is all about keeping our, being able to stay in connection to actually be in these places. So it's all just beautifully packaged in there. And so the wish to alleviate the suffering of another is, for us in the CIT curriculum, very specific to how we are naming compassion. And so this evening, we're going to do some exploring around, again, the ingredients and the things that can get in our way, like what are the obstacles or what bumps us out of the way of these kinds of things, but that we're naming it this evening is really when we get to the point where we are really aware that our motivation is, and we're aware and we're integrated that we are wishing to alleviate the suffering of others. So with that, let's go on to the next slide. We just want to really point out and name that, again, there's a biology to this, and that it's natural, and that it's normal, and that we can practice beyond it. So that there's, it is inherent or innate in our systems that we are going to have, we're going to really care about those close to us and to be really good caretakers. And that is beautiful. And we have, we look at this as that's natural and that's beautiful, and that there's not a scarcity that it needs to end there, but that there will always be a propensity to be really attentive and attending to those close to us. So with that, I'm going to turn it now to Cesar, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more, and we're going to move from there, and we're going to come in and out of some conversations, but let's give a little more of the CIT pieces of information, then we'll discuss some more things as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Renee. Just like you mentioned very well, compassion, it is biologically based, just like empathy, and just like our natural tendency for care and for socialize with other people. Even if it's biological, it is, let's say, it is more focused in our inner group or in our in group. So when our in group, it is the only one that benefits from our compassion or our empathy, we fell into this thinking trap that we call the in-group bias. It is well researched that our compassion or empathy, it can lead us to create connections with those who are that we feel closest with. But the same way that motivations for caring and alleviate the suffering of our inner group or the members of our inner group, that same motivation can lead us to create this division with others who are different than us, or who we think they don't belong to our inner group. So we have to be able to recognize this in-group bias, and so we can extend our compassion to and our values to different people, like strangers, or even people who we consider our enemies, because the ultimate goal of CIT, it is what we call extended compassion. I would like to ask, what do you think this image reflects about to you? It tells or depicts about the idea of extended compassion. This monkey and this tiger in the picture. If you would like to comment, you can type it on the chat, or you can open your mics to share with the rest of the group. What is this for you, this idea? What do you understand about this idea of extended compassion?
Overcoming fear of an enemy.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Overcoming the fear of the enemy or the stranger, or those who think or look different than us. I don't know if I think someone just typed on the chat.
Tracy, and Tracy has her hand raised afterward.
Oh yeah, please. After Tracy comment, I will read the comments on the chat. Please go ahead.
I think the picture for me depicts that compassion can be expressed from one being to another being, regardless of species. You know, they have compassion for one another.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else who wants to participate, please open your mics or raise your hand. On the meanwhile, I will read a few comments that I see on the chat. From Brian, he mentions compassion to all sentient beings. Aruna, I wonder if it means compassion is a two-way street, like both all parties must engage in it to fully experience it? I think we can try to answer that question from Aruna together. What do you guys think about these questions? Do you think compassion is a two-way street? On the meanwhile, James mentions before they build barriers to other tribes. Kavita, we can extend our compassion to friends, enemies, and strangers. Christopher, compassions to members outside our own group, and even our own species. And finally, Dan mentions hopefulness. Excellent. Thank you very much. Does anyone else would like to participate or try to answer the question from Aruna? Do you agree? Do you think it is a two-way street?
I mean, I'm just going to make a brief comment that our resolve to act from compassion does not depend on what we get back. I mean, so although sometimes it happens that way, yet it's not a required dependency in my experience. I mean, sometimes it's nice to feel the exchange, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
Thank you very much, Kavita.
So-
I think Brian agrees. He says no, and I myself, I think personally that compassion, the idea it is because it is focused on the other person. It has to be about alleviating the suffering of the other person. But the result of compassion, just like common sense or common experience, and even science has shown, it is something that at the end it is beneficial also for you. Even if the other person, it is the receiver of the action, you as well benefit from doing something for the other person or for the other group. Now I would like to ask you.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to
Oh.
make one more comment because I love Aruna's question
Yeah,
because it's making me think like, wait, okay, so this is like more nuanced, but this is what I want to add. So I agree with Kavita and Brian, and I also wonder if our motivations are really deeply pure, if we don't, almost like a spaceship hookup, that it's much more likely that it will look like that. I mean, not literally, but that it will, like, we'll really meet the mark of what alleviating the suffering of another looks like, as opposed to what we think it should look like. And so I like the question to help me consider what is possible if I stay humble and in inquiry. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you very much. I see Aruna. Would you like to comment? And also Melody, after you.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, like, the photo just made me think, like, I don't know, this is a thought I always have, is like, I guess the results of being compassionate, like in this photo, it actually came from the photo. Like, I wonder, like, someone had to drop the rope to like make the space, but then someone also had to, like, from both sides, they're kind of a mutual trust or some sort of agreement. Or is it just like, I mean, sometimes hard to imagine, like in the cute animal sense, it's easy to envision, but like in the rough human sense, sometimes it's like harder to envision, I guess.
Thank you so much. Melody, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I was just thinking that sometimes there have to be boundaries around one's compassion. If the ape tried to do that and the tiger wasn't on board, it could be very dangerous for the ape. That doesn't mean the ape can't show compassion in other ways, but that to some degree, there has to be an okay understanding there for safety.
Thank you so much. I see another comment on the chat. I see Tracy. She mentions, no, the compassion given is independently and free from receiving it in return. Thank you very much. The next question that I would like to ask you, it is, how do you imagine, or what would you think the world would look like if we had more extended compassion? How the world will be different or better? Would you like, does any volunteer would like to share? How do you imagine the world will be like? I see a comment from Brian. It will be Shangri-La. Another comment from Anna. Compassion can be put in aside. You perceive power and picking up your empathy. Melody comment on chat, increase equity. Elizabeth, the world will be equal. Equal? Yeah, equal. Marianne, safer, happier, and with less suffering. And Tony mentions it will be a more peaceful world. Christopher, compassion will be spread continually among people. Thank you so much. Is there any other comment?
I'm sorry to be so vocal tonight, but there's this funny story that they tell about heaven and hell. And just imagine all these beings, and they have forks in heaven and hell, these really long forks, and they can't get the food in their mouth. And so they're starving all the time in hell because they have these forks. In heaven, they have the same long forks, but everybody's feeding everybody else. So the length of the fork is no problem. And that's sort of a, I don't know, related somehow.
That's a beautiful image. It made me think of the John Lennon Imagine. Tracy mentions we will be more connected to all others and celebrate our commonalities versus our differences. Thank you so much. And the other thing that we would like to share with you, it is how compassion often is seen as a weakness. And in CIT, we like to encourage you and push this idea that compassion is a strength. This picture, maybe you are familiar with, or you've seen it on before. This image, it is anonymous person in the Tiananmen Square in 1989, where this person, with just his body and his presence, he was able to stop this column of tanks that in that moment, students were protesting for democracy in China. And basically the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, was trying to get rid of the protest. And again, maybe you already know about this story, but the belief that compassion, it is a weakness, it is what we call a thinking trap, because maybe in our culture, it is, there's this idea that if you are a compassionate person, you are a doormat or you're a pushover, but actually we believe that compassion can lead us to do incredibly acts of courage for others, just like this anonymous person that basically was immortalized forever in this very iconic picture of someone who was struggling and was trying to support something as valuable as the well-being of his friends and other students. So probably we have this without realizing, we have this misunderstanding of the word compassion, because again our culture promotes compassion as something more related to a weakness, or someone who is a very naive or really good person. But compassion, it won't lead you to like stand up or to basically get to the top of the food chain, if we can say it, if we want to put it that way. So compassion oriented to others, therefore is a form of inner strength, but it can also lead us to do incredibly act of courage for others, for the well-being of other people. So with that being said, I would like to pass the group to Sally Marie, so she can share with the rest of us the components of compassion.
She's been being knocked off with her internet, so I'm just letting her back in. And she's been having problems. If she turned her screen on, it kicked her internet out.
Oh,
so
thanks for letting me know, because I didn't realize.
Let's do this. Let's Sally Marie, do you feel like you can turn your screen on, or do you, if not, if you can just unmute, you're welcome. We've just turned to your next slide, and if you want me to support you in that, if your internet is messed up, let me know. Can you hear us, Sally Marie?
She has in the chat that it's messing up.
Yeah, so let's do this. We'll trade parts, and if she wants some, she can take some of my slides in a moment. So we're going to look right now at the 3 components of compassion from the point of view of CIT. And again, we just want to name, there's no kind of absolutism here, but this is a model that helps us just work with ingredients. So let's start with naming what will be the first point of view of these 3 components. And I can't remember how these slides populate, Cesar. Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say clicking it so we have a visual there. So the first piece of this Venn diagram, as it were, around compassion is really the attention to noticing suffering. Now, we can think of this in these really general terms of, noticing the unhoused person on the street, or noticing, poverty driving in a particular area, or, in those kinds of categories. And for sure, that's a practice. We'd like to invite, but the actual practice of noticing suffering is so nuanced and comes to us on every level in, potentially every relationship and every kind of environment we can attend to. So while we, for sure want to pay attention to the economic injustices and different major social issues, we also want to invite in that noticing suffering amongst and around us wherever we are, that suffering is not only the experience of those with less, but actually also quite a big thing to notice in different ways of those with a lot of privilege, or with a lot of capacity and a lot of power, and many dimensions. So that's a different kind of practice, in my opinion. And I'd love to hear how some of you notice your practice around noticing suffering in some different kinds of categories. Does anybody want to comment on that, or just lived experience around noticing suffering and how you can look at it from a lot of different perspectives?
This is Roxanne here. Sometimes I see someone who's really powerful, like a powerful politician or a dictator or something like that, and they may be really, ruthless and not very empathetic themselves, but then you see that like they're not happy, they're maybe really afraid and angry and paranoid all the time that they're going to be overthrown, so like even somebody I can on the surface be like, oh, I really really dislike this person, they're a bad person, you can still see that like their choices, like maybe they think it's making them happy, but they're really not happy, they're really suffering.
Thanks, Roxanne. So, and what I hear in that, for me, that's an extra challenge, is when people have a lot of power and they can create a lot of suffering for others, then I can really get in my blind spots about not being able to notice, or maybe I don't want to notice their suffering, because I sort of turn the dial down and I say, I just want them out of power, or whatever kind of power they might hold. Perhaps it's a teacher or a I mean, if it's somebody has power over, or a political leader, or somebody at the head of an organization, but there's a lot of isolation and a lot of performing that happens in our world, let's put it that way. And there's a lot of suffering connected to those kinds of roles that we occupy. So where else do you see it? Like where are your skills in noticing suffering? Name some other noticings.
There's a raised hand.
Please, Dan, go ahead.
Well, I'm a massage therapist, so I can look at somebody pretty quickly, and most people in the healing professions can and notice suffering. And the word I've used for many years, and this maybe branches back into compassion, is intention. And then I like to say that the vast majority of us have the capacity to heal or bring relief to others. It's just a matter of accessing that within ourselves. And that comes back to, well, do you want to? And that could be even with your people close to you, your partners, much less someone who walks into your room for the first time or someone you see weekly or whatever. But the intentionality of wanting to make that person feel better, wanting to bring that person some level of relief. And it's a very powerful thing. If you can really tap into it, it's a beautiful thing for yourself, because it sort of imbues you with this sense of that you are capable of doing that. And if that's something that brings you a gratification or fulfillment, then it's a beautiful circle of nourishing.
Thank you so much, Dan. Who else? Michaela, please.
This past week, I was watching released videos of police brutality in Louisiana to this gentleman that was murdered 2 years ago, but they said he died by hitting a tree. And the fact that his mother, it still gets me, didn't learn about it until 2 years later and saw the videos. Her son was saying, I'm sorry. And then he said, I'm scared. And they continued. And I won't go into the graphic detail, but it's awful. And it just turned my stomach inside and out. And I thought, they had no intention of helping this man. I witnessed again another murder, and I just felt like it's got to stop. It's got to stop. And I feel for these parents, mothers that are losing their children needlessly, and it really affected me.
Michaela, thanks for sharing, and you're pointing out what the absence in a really gross way looks like. And I suspect many of us know more of the details of that horrific exposure in that story. So it allows us to look at the range of possibility and how incredibly painful and harmful it is when when that intention is missing in such a huge degree. So
yeah, there was no compassion. There was no compassion. Yeah, amazing.
So let's look at what else is being commented on in the chat. Aruna has said, people who do not try to change behaviors that they know are hurtful to others, or people who are extremely privileged and blind to others, experiences and pain are my trouble spot. Yeah, I bet you're not alone, at least me too. It's extra challenge. And Jim is commenting, intention may be one of our strongest tools to engage compassion. I'm going to come back to both Jim and Dan's comments. I don't want to conflate or extrapolate too much, but I want to bring out a point from the CIT point of view around their comments. Aruna, I have really hard time feeling compassion for those as well. I struggle with that. So We can have self-compassion and then know these are our working edges. And then Melody, I was encouraged to see drivers that were not driving well as experiencing suffering, saying suffering all over the road. And when I do that, it can help me to connect to the idea of me too. Well, it's really powerful because that's an easy one for me to get kind of out of my resilient zone. And Tony's commenting, I agree, that was very gut-wrenching, yes. And so all of that. So I want to lift up right now that, you know, it's an element of this that catches many folks in our CIT course, is that from the CIT point of view, compassion is a motivation. And so I want to name that Dan and Jim both commented on intention, and I don't want to, there may be a difference between intention and motivation, but I just want to say they sound parallelly to me. And so I would love to hear if that's if my thinking is maybe a little off on that, but I just want to name that it's a pivotal piece, that it's a motivation, that it doesn't always look like an explicit action. And we'll go into that a little bit more, but I just want you, I again will invite us to carry that idea along with us as we look at more of these ingredients and move along. All right, so thank you so much for the comments. And Sally Marie messaged me on WhatsApp, and I just want to apologize on her behalf of the struggle she's having, because she was going to support us with part of this, and we were looking forward to the fun of having her be on the team with us. So we'll loop her in whenever we can. So, and what I'm seeing on the screen right now is just the thinking traps that get in the way, but many of you have alluded to these. It's the notion that we can get caught up, or remember when we spoke about the 8 worldly concerns, and that we perhaps have our intentions are misaligned in particular ways, that we start being more invested in ourselves in a particular way and not noticing our common humanity and being self-interested, that can start to create little blind spots for us, or maybe put blinders on of our capacity and perhaps even our intention to lessen the suffering of others. So Caesar, let's move to the next slide. And let's add to this now, adding into this Venn diagram, bringing back in from last week, experiencing empathic concern, which has its own 2-dimensional practices. And I don't know how each of you are sitting with the pieces of affective empathy and cognitive empathy, but for most of us, it's maybe some of us have a natural propensity one over the other. So there's a meta practice in this, that to be, building our, to be doing, like I would say, like the balanced weightlifting routine, to be in compassion. For some of us, we might need to have 2 legs days and 1 arms shoulders day, and for others it might be 2 shoulders day and 1 legs day, depending on how we're naturally calibrated and or what our other practices are. Just to name that some of us may really easily get in that flooding somatic emotional, really relate, and that we can maybe work on the practices of building the perspective taking points of view, not only with those we don't relate to, but even with those we do. And sometimes it's been named, and I don't know if we spoke to this last week, sometimes this is helpful, and put it down if it isn't, but they perceive it as, or there's a way of thinking about empathy as hot empathy and cool empathy. So that like the warm is the kind of that rushing of emotions, and that's would be akin to affective, and the cool is like taking a step back and kind of viewing the scene. Maybe we think of it like situational awareness on an emotional social level. Like you might think of if you've been trained in any kind of emergency services, like checking the scene and the elements around you. So it's really taking a perspective on more of a systems level, even if you're working with an individual, but you're looking at it more in a little slightly broader context. So we build this piece in. Let's then move to the next slide, and we're just adding these little pieces in so that when we go into our next round of conversation, we can weave these components in as well. That the third element of this is really, for me, this ties very much back to self-compassion and our sense of our innate value, that I tie to a sense of agency that is tied to this, the shadow side of it, or or the, the thinking trap part of it can be if we don't feel a sense of empowerment, that we feel like either a huge sense of discouragement, or there's this categorical kind of apathy, or that we have that sentence, well, what's my one little piece going to matter? So if we get in those kinds of mindsets and thinking traps, and we lose track of our innate value, and again, for me, at least just this is my personal experience, so it may be really different for you, but I go into my own self-doubt, perhaps about my own value, and then that is almost like a domino that clicks off these other things, where then I think, well, maybe I can't do it, and I'm just one person. So we just want to name these three things and how they overlap together as having such, these three things nested together are what really support us to have a robust practice start to be continuing to develop around compassion. Caesar's going to tell us about some research and give an example now. And this is a really powerful example of using these three components. So I want to turn it to him so that he can share that story and that research with you.
Thank you very much, Renee. Before I move on into the next slide, I would like to add something about the things that you were commenting on the chat. Related with this idea of how difficult it is to feel compassion or be compassionate or feel empathy towards these people who provoke so much suffering to others. And it was an interview to His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and he was asked about the situation in Tibet, and about how basically for many years the Chinese Communist Party was creating this cultural genocide of all related to their religion and the culture in Tibet. And he was asked about if he felt angry and basically what was his reaction towards the Chinese Communist Party, and how he dealt with those feelings or those emotions of rage or anger towards this situation or the actions perpetrated by these people. And he admitted that, of course, it was natural to feel angry for this situation, but he mentions that the only way that he was able to still feel compassion to the people who are doing this, who are provoking so much suffering to people in Tibet, it was to never lose focus of their common humanity, never lose focus of, even if these people from the Chinese Communist Party were provoking so much suffering to people in Tibet, the way he was able to still feel compassion or feel compassion to these people, it was always trying to keep in mind their common humanity, that at the end these people also suffer, and these people also were trying to seek for greater happiness and less suffering. So that's the thing that I wanted to share with you regarding that last point. Now I'm going to move on just to talk a little bit more about this idea of this sense of agency. And in this picture, it is an image of a Jewish couple hiding in the attic of non-Jewish friends during the Shoah, the Holocaust in World War II. And there was a research that was made by Samuel and Per Olliner, and they interviewed several people who rescued Jewish during the occupation of Poland and France. And the occupation of the Nazis in Europe during the Holocaust. And they discovered that among the factors that distinguish the people who help rescue these Jews or these entire families, the difference between these people and those who didn't do it, it was this sense of agency or this sense of efficacy. In other words, those who rescue or help rescue believe that their action, even if their action was or seemed like minimal in the middle of this huge chaos or destruction provoked by the Nazi war machine, however small their action, they believe that actually it could make a difference, even if the difference it is just small. Maybe they cannot make a difference for the entire Jewish population, but they can make a world difference to that one person that they were able to help. And in contrast, those people who did not help to rescue Jewish during the Holocaust, they report and feeling this like belief that their action, whatever small or large, could not help or will not help to make any significant difference against this greater force who was the Nazi army. They didn't believe or they didn't bother to act because they didn't believe that anything they could do will make any difference at all. So this study that these people did, interviewing all these witnesses, really brings shine to this idea of how internal self-confidence and believing in our ability to make a difference allow us and allow those people who rescue the Jewish family to see and to act. So this sense of agency is a very, very powerful, and it is essential. It is I believe, one of the essential parts of the components of compassion. And the complete opposite of this sense of agency, it is something that probably many of us, I absolutely still work a lot with this thinking trap. It is the thinking trap of powerlessness. I think very often that it is not in my power to change or to alleviate or to basically make a difference in this world. And very often we feel this powerlessness with even small acts, because we don't believe, we don't think that anything we do will make a difference. Even if it is just, again, a small act to help or alleviate the suffering of a single individual. And until we move on to this discernment, it will be very difficult to us to know that we actually can do. And of sense of agency, it is definitely necessary to step up, to move on, and to lead this motivation and lead this desire to compassion to actually doing something, to action. It is moving or desire or motivation to action. And this sense of agency, it is an essential part in that. And lastly, I would like to share this idea of how compassion, it has to come accompanied by what we call discernment or wisdom. We will move on into this topic in the series 3 when we talk about appreciating interdependence and engaging with system. But basically, this idea of the owl needs both wings to be able to fly. Our compassion can lead us to or can bring or can give us the motivations to alleviate the suffering of others. But in that motivation, without discernment, our decisions or action or inaction can lead us to create harm or to taking not the best decision to actually alleviate the suffering of others. So compassion, it has to come with discernment, which ultimately will lead us to discernment into the best decision possible to alleviate the suffering of others without creating harm or without bringing unintended consequences. With that being said, I will invite, I think if Sally Marie still has trouble, Renee, so she can lead us through the next activity.
Thank you, Cesar. Before we go forward, I actually want to ask a question related to what Cesar presented, particular to housing Nazis and the research that the Ohlingers did on altruism. So one of the questions I have for the group is, how do you view, how is it in a special case, or how do you decipher, or what's the conversation when our actions, let's say compassionate actions, also include great risk? Because we've given you examples of Tiananmen Square and housing German people, or rather Jewish people in Nazi Germany, and the implications of your actions also include the potential of incredible personal harm. So my question is how do we talk about this, or how is that a factor for any of us? And what comes to mind is all the stories you hear about the bystander, effect, or the Good Samaritans, or people saying, "Oh, well, I don't want to get involved," but then some people do. Like, what happens for you on these kinds of decisions? Like, how do you bring it down to like the risk it creates for you? And it may not be you being arrested, but it could be all down a gradient of impacts that it might have on you. I'd love to hear from the group. How do you consider these things when you're factoring in compassion, if it is a motivation that actually then turns to action or not? Like, how do you work with that? Tracy, please.
For me, I've known to sometimes leap before I think. And I don't know where that comes from. It's just, I just do. I see someone who might be in trouble or in need in a various situation. It doesn't have to be anything major, but it could be a very risk to me, and I will jump in and help when I can and however I can. If I see someone in trouble or in need and they need help, I try to be there regardless of the cost it might present to me. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. And do you consider that an asset, or is there a side of that that's, like, where's your working edge around that, or is it just how it is?
It's what I choose to do. I mean, it's not a working edge, it's just how I am. I think if I always try to, maybe sometimes I'm not thinking at the moment, I'm just reacting to try to help and be of benefit to someone. And I guess if I were in their shoes and I needed someone's help or someone's, showing of compassion for me, I would also hope that someone would also just jump in with both feet and take that risk, as well. So I don't always think it through sometimes, but I just jump in to help someone, regardless of what might be an outcome for me that might not be a positive outcome or perceived to be a positive outcome. I think helping others, one has a great opportunity to have a great benefit, just of feeling good that they've been able to help someone else. And that's the best reward for myself. knowing that I'm being of help to others.
Thanks, Tracy. And someone else has their hand raised and I cannot, oh, Mary Ann, please.
Marianne.
Unmute. I think there's an element of inspiration involved. I don't think we think through most of the things that we do. I think you see something, you just have a feeling to do something, and there's some sense that what part of your skill set you can bring to the situation, because maybe I can't do anything about world hunger, but I can make a little donation or whatever kind of donation I can. Or maybe I'm not going to go out and stop a tank, but maybe I'll write something. Or, it's like, people know themselves, and what aspect you could bring to a situation, and you have an impulse to do it. And so you do.
Thanks, Marianne. Kavita, I would really love for you to give us the audible version of your comment.
It's really classic in a way, but right now we have two early 20s somethings. Christopher's nephew and his new wife are living with us, and it's sort of interesting. We want to do as much as we can for them, and an interesting thing happened where they almost pushed back. It's like, no, we need to discover how we're going to be adults, and so in this rushing in to try to cushion the harshness of reality and what it costs to live life and make a living and all this stuff, it feels much more compassionate in terms of thinking it through and looking at how their life is going to be for 20, 30 years. By leaving them alone, they're learning that they actually have the inner strength to figure it out. And actually now, and all of us have dealt with addiction of various permutations and substances, and in AA and Al-Anon specifically, sometimes you just stepping back so that that person who's struggling to get sober can feel that their strength is there, that they can do it, they can get sober. If you keep rescuing them, it's the classic thing. Anyway, it's again, always, as always, it's not one or the other, but it's the skillful dance we do.
Thanks, Kavita. And Anne, and then Christopher.
Yeah, for me, it's a risk either way. And it doesn't make any difference how small or large the action is, but what you're risking is life itself. And I don't want to make that sound like over whatever, but if I don't extend compassion, my life decreases little bits by big bits. And if I don't extend compassion, that may well be true for the other as well. So at least for me, when discerning, it's always kind of boils down to the question of love. How much do I love this other person who I may not even know? How much, and I'm not saying love lightly, how much do I love life itself? And so even with Kavita's comment, that's another, it's a whole level of love to discern, to step back and know that that could be your greatest act of compassion for that person. I think it's a risk to do it, and it's a risk not to do it. So when somebody's standing by, they've lost everything as far as I'm concerned. And when I stand by and I do that, I feel an emptiness and a loss.
Thank you, Anne. Christopher.
I wanted to go back to your original question, which had to do with the risk and the danger involved, and what would prompt somebody to act in a way that's compassionate, even though there's a lot of risk and danger involved. And so I want to talk about a personal experience that I had. Kavita and I were driving. It was during the winter. I think we were in Colorado. It was very icy rain. And there was a car in front of us that spun around in circles right in front of us as we were going around a sort of a curve in the highway. And the car spun around, went off the highway, flipped over in the median, and cars were continuing to come and go and come and go. And it reminds me of what Marianne Giorgio said. You don't even think about it. There's just, is this in my skill set? Is there something I can do? So I immediately pulled over to the side of the road, went over to where the people were overturned in the car. And I'm thinking, this is dangerous. The car could blow up. I don't know what I'm going to find. But the car was turned over, and I helped pull the people out of there. We called the police came, and then we gave them our coats, our winter coats, because they didn't have any. They had t-shirts on. But that all happened not with a sense of anything other than, wow, this is in my face. This is in my skill set. I can do something about this, and I have to do something about this, because if I don't, these people could die. So I think the element of danger and why people will do things like that when there is great risk is that I think you can see if you don't do it, it's going to be terrible for the people you're not helping. So it just happened. It wasn't like there was no thought about it. And what Marianne said really resonated with me. It was like, in the moment you see, you have the skill set, you can do this, and you just do it, you know. But that was my own personal example of something that involved risk and danger.
Thank you, Christopher. I want to add in, based on what all of you were saying, I just finished a book over the weekend called Humankind, A Hopeful History. It's by Rutger Bregman. And it's refuting the notion that we all, kind of don't care, or sort of like it's refuting we're all, we just drive by. And it's telling things in a particularly, well, it's even showing some of the research that's documenting that being kind of distorted. It's very interesting. What I wanted to name that several of you have touched on is, and I can't remember who said, but I'm going to attribute it the wrong place. When we first started about what does compassion mean, someone said connection. Was it Jim? Was that you? In any event, I want to name that connection. What is I'm just going to, from the book I just finished, I have these little threads, and it could be really, wrong, but just try this on, that it's actually being some level of connected or present to the moment, that then the natural flow can take place with maybe out that reservation. And what Anne was naming, that risk is like, and what Christopher's naming is like, it just kind of, you're actually in some kind of flow. So the author of this book documented, the horrible stories of somebody being assaulted and nobody helping, but they are hearing it. But the notion of everybody thought everybody else was attending to it. But then versus like the car goes into the river or flips or whatever it is. And then all this connection comes because there's a sense of connection, even if it's that you're directly witnessing it. But there's some nuance around that. So I wanted to name that. The other thing I wanted to notice is that Kavita brought up the not doing. I'm going to name it refraining. And I just want to name that I think the pandemic has been a very big practice in refraining. So I want to invite us to look at the behaviors we have had during the pandemic that involved refraining from, and then fill in the blank, and how that is amazing compassion. I just want to name that as I want to offer that as a food for thought, because I think we're being schooled right now in that this is a very dimensional practice ultimately. So I want to invite all of the angles in and really support what all of you have named here. And with that, we are going to invite you into an activity where you're going to talk about, in hindsight, wait, I want to just read Brian's comment first. How does the most compassionate help the most compassionate? Oh, that's okay. I want to just read, maybe we'll make this maybe we'll frame our activity around Brian's question. So how does the most compassionate help the most compassionate? Well, my first response is I have no idea, but in this group, maybe we can frame it even around that. The activity we wanted to work with this evening, and Brian, I 100% invite you in to shape the response from you, maybe in this context, if you can work with your own question, and anyone else who's interested, let's angle it that way. But the general conversation right now is, in hindsight, can you think of an action that you took or an activity that you were involved in where unwittingly, with all of your best intentions, you were missing one of those ingredients, the Venn diagram with the noticing suffering, empathic concern, and mind blank. What is my third ingredient?
Agency.
Thank you so much. Looks like I got up too early. Thank you. Tracy's always my co-facilitator in the background with Caesar, so thank you. So yes, so noticing suffering, empathic concern, and a sense of agency. Can any of you think of a moment? I mean, it might have been a missed opportunity, or it might have been you went zooming in and something wasn't quite on board. Thank you. Thank you. Just in case I forget again, I don't totally embarrass myself. So who can think of a story in their life where in hindsight, they didn't quite have their game on, and we're all learning. So does anyone have a story they can tell us from some time in their life that they can name something that wasn't there? And, or Brian's question, which is so rich, is like, how is maybe, well, I don't want to distort Brian's question. Maybe Brian, put your question out and see if you can weave it in with us.
Renee, also, I think that question will be answered partially in the next skill when we talk about interdependence, because with this idea of the quote from Martin Luther King, what affect one directly affect us all indirectly. That's the same way backwards. What benefits one directly benefits all indirectly. So to help the most compassionate person, it is do compassionate action for others.
Okay, so Brian, Caesar just answered your question.
No. I'm just saying it's partially. We can discuss it in the next session, because we are going to talk about interdependence, which is an essential part of how we can try to expand compassion and fix our systems.
Okay, so Brian, do you want to weave anything in here?
No, I'm happy to wait till next week. I would say, or 2 weeks. I would say the other thing is I like the definition you just gave, Cesar, about the way to help the most compassionate is to be the most compassionate to others. So that's a good answer. I was going to tell a short story where you want an example of something where I probably didn't have enough agency to action out of the Venn diagram. And I bring this specific example up because I think it complicates the message a little bit, or the teaching a little bit. So I had a younger brother who was 2 years younger than I, and he ended up nearly assaulting a renter in my parents' house at one point. Excuse me. Renter was able to convince him not to do anything, and he eventually just left. And so the renter contacted me, and I decided I needed to go have a chat with my younger brother about this specific behavior. So I did, and we met in a public restaurant. And, I have empathy for him, compassion for him, because his life was not easy for a variety of different reasons. So he suffered as a middle child, and he suffered from other mental health issues. So his life was not easy, and his behavior was kind of a reflection of his life. But during this meeting, we got to a point where I was trying to convince him that the behavior was not appropriate. And at that point, he pulled out a .45 caliber pistol and laid it on the table with the gun pointed at me. And the reason I just said I don't know, this is an example I didn't have agency, is that I said, you know what? At this point, if you're going to live your life the way you live it, and you want to make the decisions you make, you can do that. But I can't continue to subject myself to either dealing with your decisions or the outcomes of your decisions, especially if they're going to include criminal and inappropriate behavior. So I got up and walked out, never saw him again, and have never seen, he's passed away now, so I never saw him after that get together. So the sense of agency, the piece that's missing, was I probably should have continued to engage with him, continue to try to reason with him, continue to try to convince him that his decisions and his behaviors were not, at least socially, acceptable. I just didn't do that.
Brian, thank you for sharing that story and bringing that nuance and that level of complexity, because it's in our stories and our experiences, I suspect. But I really appreciate what you brought. Others? Marianne.
I just a comment on what Brian's experience. Sometimes agency, not having agency, is just tied up with not knowing what to do or how to do anything. And so, there's no fault in that. I mean, we're not all, miracle workers or, with unlimited wisdom. I mean, some situations are incredibly hard and we just don't know how to respond. So we don't. I think that's where no agency comes in an awful lot of the time. We don't know what to do. No fault, though.
Thanks, Marianne. And we're going to layer in the weeks ahead the discernment piece, but I want to invite, with Brian's story, the intention, whether the agency piece or not, but also the discernment piece, that we're all works in progress around that and this. But I have a question. Is it compassionate to create an amount of distance that allows us to remain in compassion to the circumstance? I don't know if that question makes sense, but does it make sense? Like, in other words, is being too close in maybe make it impossible to be compassionate in our current circumstance or condition? Let's say we're progressing on the path. So if we actually create some space, we can then be in compassion, because we are outside, maybe we've stepped away enough that, yeah, and Melody's bringing it up, that boundaries really create our ability to then sit in a seat with compassion, but we're actually a little more distant. Like, just curious how we look at that. So Melody's saying absolute boundaries are frequently very compassionate. And Kavita was naming this again, maybe this is looped into the refraining, but I've also looked at it almost like a Gestalt thing, where it's basically saying, if I have realistic expectations for myself, like my super excellent self isn't quite able to stay functional in a compassionate way if I'm right up against the table with the gun pointed at me, like on the table. So I would need, kind of metaphorically, to step back and stay further away to even attempt to then continue to be in relationship or to be in connection.
But Renee, isn't that exactly the reason that we're studying CIT from a systems approach? Because stepping back from something that's occurring, whether it's between two people at a table with a gun on it, or whether it's the entire healthcare system. In order to judge what your move is, you got to be able to step back and see it, even within ourselves. I mean, I could be doing damage to myself and not know it because I'm not stepping far enough back to see myself. I think that's one of the huge things that comes out of CIT is that it's this systems approach to compassion, a compassion approach to systems, to be able to see the picture. And yeah, like when you're in that situation, space becomes a compassion move, I think.
Great
Be able to
feedback,
see
Anna.
clearly.
Thank you. And we'll look forward to actually asking these questions again as we move, directly into the systems piece. But with this group, many of you were already like speaking in these spaces and dimensions as it is. And Caesar, do you want to make a comment about what you wrote in the chat?
Yeah, it was about what you just was mentioning about being too close or trying to be too close to that person you are trying to help. Sometimes it can make it really difficult for you to see the whole picture and to act with discernment to take the better decision that can guide your compassion. From up close, it can really be difficult to see the entirety of the problem and the best solution possible. So sometimes distance, it is really helpful.
Thank you, Caesar. And so now I'm hoping that this conversation has spawned some ideas and some reflections and some thoughts for you. So we're going to take the time we normally take for reflective writing, and I will post those questions in the chat. So we'll spend a few moments with these questions to just further, look into our stories and our conversations with ourselves, and then we will move into our mindful dialogue session. So let me first get these posted in the chat for you. One moment, I'm a little slow. So I'll let you know when there's 1 minute left, but if we can just take some quiet time, we'll take a few minutes here to look at these questions and just write some reflections. apologize. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So I want us to take a breath and just be with your body for a second. This is really
It hurt.
big, deep conversation. It hurts, Elizabeth. So
My
let's
neck.
just be
Right
with
here.
ourselves for just a moment. Just is like, let's be connected to our bodies for just a second here and just invite ourselves to process this a teeny little bit.
9 minutes.
And Caesar's going to give us the slideshow back. We're just going to catch now this last little piece that we want to present this evening. And for any of you that are practitioners, particularly, well, in this particular way, my familiarity is, and not that it's masterful nor scholarly, but in this way of iterating on compassion, I want to bring in the wisdom of any of you who are Tibetan Buddhist practitioners, or any kind of practitioners that you work with these nuanced levels. And my understanding is, depending on what teacher you might have, even within the Buddhist tradition, they might be sequenced in slightly alternating ways, depending on frame or point of view. Now, I may be incorrect about that, but from the CIT point of view, we want to name, and again, couching this from the notion that compassion is a motivation. So that while it may lead to concrete specific actions, that's not ultimately necessarily so. And we want to name the first place to start is this point of wishing. This and I'm not gonna feel confident that my language is gonna match. So question mark, is this the intention space? What do you think? Like wishing for compassion, and we can give some examples, but just if you look at it this way in general, we're differentiating between wishing, aspiring, and then in the engaged compassion piece. And I know with my Tibetan Buddhist teacher, and this again is secular, but this piece comes rather directly from Beyond Religion and the Dalai Lama. So there is this, there's a correlation there. With my Tibetan teacher, and I was sharing this with Cesar and Sally Marie previously before the class, he would say, intention, I wish, aspiration, may they, connect, I vow, commit, I pray, as kind of a corollary. And he also, my teacher would frame it as inner, I wish, and here's the example, inner, I wish they were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Outer, may these beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Outer, I vow to free them from suffering and the causes of suffering. Again, this vow word would not be in the secularized version, but just to kind of draw some parallels. And then again, kind of an inner we, and this again maybe speaks a bit to Brian's question and Caesar's commentary on this. I pray that they may be free from suffering and its causes, that it goes from this inner, outer, and then inner kind of interdependent we-ness. So just to bring that in and all whatever wisdom and nuance you can deliver, from the CIT point of view, we want to name that having this wish is this powerful place to be, and it has merit, and it has its own nuance as a place to be working with compassion. And okay, so I'm seeing a couple messages, and I want to make sure that Anna, are you good with what this is maybe ancient history, but I've just seen some commentary. And then also, okay, Anna had to go. Dan, wishing to help someone, yes. So thank you. Confirmation, just in sense of like that landing or making sense. And Tracy, yes, level 1, wishing compassion is part of the motivation and intention. And Anna, you are here, so welcome and thank you. So how is wishing compassion and aspiring compassion, how would you tell the difference? And we've got some really simplistic examples we'll show you afterwards, but I would like to hear from each of you, and thanks for populating that for this explanation on the screen. Each level is the way we're looking at it, has a different of agency and commitment. And again, like in what I read, you know, more straight out of Tibetan mindset, there's this, you know, kind of stepping stone set of experiences as well. For you, what's the difference between wishing and aspiring? Karen, please.
This kind of came up in our small sharing too, in terms of identifying what is a compassionate act. So I would see level 1 as the intention. I want to act with compassion. 2, I would kind of, I think, put on my researcher hat and perhaps even get in a group and discuss with people, what are some compassionate actions? And then 3, I think, is when you're looking at like movements and you're actually, you know, planning how are we going to take an action step that is maximizes compassion for the most individuals. But I do have one story that I wanted to relay, and I think it gets back to the question that I would put into with aspiring to act with compassion. And the question that I struggled with in this scenario is, what in that moment would have been an act of compassion? And that was a number of years ago. I was doing a book study with people. It was Karen Armstrong's 10 steps to, or 12 steps to a compassionate life. And I was flying home because my dad was in the process of dying. And as I'm sitting in the airport waiting for the last leg, there was a woman in the airport, and this was before we had to have masks and there was restrictions. This was in 2012. There was a woman on the phone and she is sobbing and asking her boyfriend to meet her in the town that I'm going to be flying to, because she is seeking his comfort. But as I and everybody else that was sitting in this area waiting for our plane to arrive, we also got the information that she was married and had children. And she wanted, she kept going on about how great her husband is, but she didn't love him. And she wanted to meet with this boyfriend. And so I found myself struggling with, okay, I'd like to extend compassion to this woman, but I have no idea how to do that, given the dynamics. What would have been a compassionate act?
Amazing, amazing, you know, bringing the nuances and the complexity into it. And what a great conversation and challenge. And Dan, do you want to share something with us? And there's also a wonderful commentary in the chat.
Yeah, real briefly, wishing compassion, intention. For me, it's intention, and it's good, and it's great, and you're ready to go. Aspiring, when I see the word aspiring compassion, it brings to me all sorts of self-questioning. Can I get it done? Can I accomplish it? What is going to prevent me with this particular person or situation from achieving success with the compassion? And that brings a whole realm of, Karen used the word dynamics, into it. It's like, I don't know now, I'm not so sure. I wanted to, but so anyway, that's it.
Thank you so much. And so just let's populate the rest of the screen. And then I want to comment, just make sure we've lifted up the comments in the chat. But so we're just going to name these layers, and we've just really discussed it this way. So I just want you to see it visually. And then the example, you've already given examples, all of you that collectively that are really more nuanced than perhaps we could have on the screen next. But if you go to the next slide, Caesar, we can just go through these again with, perhaps sentences. And so this is in contextualizing with the Syrian refugees and thinking of it just in this most like, what would be a sentence that might manifest in the wishing compassion stage? So the wishing might sound like, this is terrible. I wish those refugees would be free from suffering. The aspiring is amplified with a sense of urgency or investment. But I love how Karen brought up like the research or gap, or, and Dan's same thing is like, now it's more of an assessment, or I'm hearing those kinds of words, which I think really helps inform and understand, like I like those words to help me articulate between the differences between aspiring compassion. Perhaps the sentences might look like, this is a tragedy. It would be wonderful for this to end. Maybe I will send a small donation or write a letter, but there's an investigation maybe going on, or some like perspective shifts or looking in different ways. And then the engaged compassion is, this must end. I am going to do whatever I can to help end this crisis. So you can hear in that sentence a commitment level, a kind of, maybe an informal kind of vow, even to say like, I am going to be engaged in supporting this thing to be not in the world in the same fashion. So with that, we want to turn our attention now to everything we've discussed and really support all of us to be with our thoughts and with our body and with the group and the conversation. And again, to just name that the conversation from here forward is compassion with discernment, applied from a systems thinking point of view. And that really looking from that dimension that Anne brought up just brings all of this into hopefully into more light for all of us. There's lovely comments in the chat. Make sure you've taken a look at those, and they're all important. And I want to turn it to Caesar to lead us in a contemplative practice, and to say that particularly with this group, please come back after Memorial Day weekend, because the last two conversations about systems, I can't wait to speak to all of you about this and have your wisdom brought in. And because it's bringing in complexity, but also just the beauty and the possibility of creating impact and leveraging systems and the impact we actually can have. So with that, Caesar, I turn it to you for our contemplative practice. We will stay on the call after if any of you have questions or anything, issues or things that need to be discussed, and then have a lovely, lovely Memorial Day weekend. But don't forget to come back to us for the last two sessions, because I especially want to learn from this group. So thank you so much for the conversation tonight.
Thank you so much, Renee. Now, before we move on to this contemplative practice, I would like to add that speaking about our intention and aspiring to practice more compassion and to extend our compassion, this contemplative practice, it is a really good vehicle to help us to send our compassion by this exercise. And it really reminded me, just recently, this last Saturday, I was attending a call, which was part of the Science and Wisdom of Emotion Summit, in which this Thupten Jinpa, the main translator to English of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he was talking about the importance of practicing compassion as an antidote to these challenging times. So I would like to share this contemplative practice that it shares a lot of similarities with the contemplative practice that we did during this session. So with that being said, I would like to invite you, as always, to try to find a comfortable position in your chair or in whatever place you are sitting right now. You can perhaps turn off your cameras if you feel like it. You can close your eyes if you prefer, and just relax and try to begin any practice to stabilize your body. Try to breathe, inhale and exhale slowly. Remember that you can use always any of your resources, any of the techniques like grounding or like tracking, and combine them with the following of your breath. And after you stabilize your body with this practice, bring to mind a person who is dear to you. It can be a close friend or a loved one. Try to picture this person in your mind as vividly as possible. And once you have imagined this person, think of at least 3 ways in which this person has benefited you and others. While you think about this person and the way in which this person has benefited you and others, try to keep breathing slowly and at your own rhythm. As you think about all the ways this person has benefited you and others, try to pay attention to your thoughts, feelings, and emotions that arise in your mind for this person, and try to reflect and feel while you still keep breathing slowly and at your own rhythm. Now I want to invite you to bring to mind whatever difficulties this person might be facing right now, or has faced in the past, or might have faced in the future. Think about what will bring this person genuine happiness or relieve their suffering. And then imagine yourself giving them or making it possible for them to receive whatever it is that will make them genuine happiness. As you think about making them happy, try to pay attention to the feelings that arise in your body and your mind for this person. And just keep breathing, inhaling and exhaling slowly. Now, I would like to invite you to expand your compassion to others. Recall the fact that every moment of every day we are supported by a vast network of people that we know and that we don't know. Recognize that no matter our social status or economic privilege, we are all vulnerable to present and future problems. We all experience all kind of different sufferings, aging, illness, separation from loved ones, stress, worries, anxiety, physical and mental illness, and disappointments. Try to contemplate how others, like your loved ones, deeply wish for genuine happiness. And as you do this, try to pay attention to the thoughts, emotions, and sensations that arise in your body and in your mind. Now, consider all the benefits of compassion to you and others. Try to extend your compassion as a beacon of light and send these words. May all keep hope. May all stay strong. And may all be well. While you keep sending these wishes to others, try to keep focused on the sensations that arise in your body and in your mind. And keep breathing slowly and at your own rhythm. As we draw our meditation to a close, let's shift our attention to the sensations of the body and pay attention to any pleasant or neutral sensations that you are feeling right now. As we conclude this contemplative practice, remember that you can always add a result statement or a dedicatory wish at this time. And whenever you feel ready, you can slowly and gently open your eyes. With this, we conclude this contemplative practice of compassion. And with that, I would like to thank you very much and just pass the mic to Renee so she can lead us to the closing of this session. Thank you very much.
Go forth and have a holiday, hopefully vaccinated and sharing fun in the world, but that's, I have a particular bias, I guess, in bringing in there. So please come back. We really want to talk to you for the systems part, because it's going to be so wonderful learning from all of you. So have a wonderful break. And if anybody needs anything, we will hang back. Anne has to take off. She's got relatives. And so if anybody needs anything, though, we'll stay on the call for a bit. And Kavita, thank you for your compassionate act towards your chickens with the foxes out. Bye, everybody.
Only Amelia is left, but I think she will still be connected.
Okay, Kavita, are you really there?
Should we stop recording? Oh, Kavita is recording, right?
She's recording, so I wanted to, does it matter if we stop it? It doesn't impact because that's she's the owner. Is that true? Because it goes to her.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it?
I think it should.
Okay. I'm here. She's out with the chickens. I was just trying to find her mouse so I could just.
You know, there's more important things.
Okay.
There's more important things in recordings. The chickens with the
I know.
foxes.
I will stop.